So, we've got something pretty exciting to talk about because Owlcat Games just dropped the massive Rogue Trader 1.5 patch, also known as the Fifth Gargantuan update. And it's honestly one of the biggest updates the game's had since launch. If you've been running campaigns, experimenting with builds, or just keeping an eye on how Owlcat's been tweaking the balance since release, this update is a serious shakeup. It's not one of those tiny patches that just fixes a few bugs and calls it a day. This one's got major reworks, new items, balance changes, colony tweaks, and plenty of quality of life improvements that make the whole experience feel more polished and refined. And yeah, we'll talk about whether or not you should start a new save because I know that's the first question that hits everyone's mind after a patch this size. So, first off, let's talk about the big changes that actually matter for gameplay, because 1.5 really changes the feel of some origins. Four of the older origins, Astra Militarum Commander, Ministorum Priest, Navy Officer, and Commissar, got full-on reworks. If you ever felt like some origins were a little weaker compared to the newer ones introduced later on, like they didn't quite have the same spark or depth, that's exactly what Owlcat's addressed. These reworks don't just change a few abilities. They introduce new mechanics that make each of these origins feel distinct and much more rewarding to play. You can tell Owlcat wanted to make sure every origin feels like it belongs in the same tier, both in terms of gameplay complexity and raw power. So if you played through before and felt like your commander wasn't pulling their weight or your priest just felt too limited, now's the time to revisit those characters. They've been given a serious glow up. And speaking of things that got buffed up, the update adds 45 new items and 25 new talents. That's a ton of new stuff to experiment with. We're talking rare weapons, exotic war gear, and just cool things that add more flavor and depth to your loadouts. If you've been running the same build across multiple runs, this update might finally give you a reason to mix things up a bit. Plus, the new talents really help expand build diversity. Some of them are niche but powerful, while others feel like missing puzzle pieces that now make certain playstyles click in a way they didn't before. Oh, and there are also new portraits. 4 of them, actually. They added new ones for Malice, Commissar, Clementia Wersarian, and Abel. It's a small touch, but it's the kind of thing that keeps the game world feeling fresh. The portraits in Rogue Trader always had a distinct style that helped flesh out personalities, and having more of them just makes the whole companion roster look more visually balanced. Now let's get into something that really impacts the late game, colony management. Owlcat rebalanced the entire colony system, and honestly, this is something that needed a little love. Before, the economy could snowball pretty easily. If you set things up efficiently early on, by mid-game, you were rolling in resources with very little challenge. The new adjustments make the whole system more strategic. You can't just automate your way to infinite success anymore. Now, choices matter more, trade-offs feel meaningful, and managing your colonies actually feels like you're running a dynasty instead of just pressing the same buttons over and over for passive income. It's still rewarding, but you have to think about sustainability and consequences. And that fits with the overall tone of Rogue Trader. This isn't a game that should hand you everything for free. The new colony tuning really aligns better with that sense of grim responsibility that defines the Warhammer 40k universe. It's not about perfection, it's about survival through strategy. Next up, let's talk balance. This update brings a full archetype balance pass, and yeah, that means some of the press one button to win builds got toned down. You know the ones, those ridiculously overpowered combinations that could clear rooms before anyone else even got a turn. Owlcat finally reeled some of those in. It's not like they completely gutted anything, but they definitely narrowed the gap between the top tier and mid-tier archetypes. Some players might groan about it, but honestly, it's a good thing for the long-term health of the game. Rogue Trader is built around experimenting with party synergies, and when one or two archetypes just overshadow everything else, it kills variety. After this patch, it feels like there's more reason to try different combos instead of just defaulting to the same meta every run. If you were rocking one of those super broken builds, don't panic. You don't have to throw your save away. The respec system makes it easy to adjust your character, swap a few talents, and find something new that still fits your style. That said, if you really want to experience all the new reworks and colony adjustments from the ground up, starting a new save is absolutely worth it. The early game feels different now, especially if you're using one of the origins that got revamped. But if you've got an ongoing campaign you're attached to, you'll still see benefits from the update, just maybe not the full scope of the reworks. Now, while the new features and balance tweaks are exciting, it's worth mentioning how many bugs this update squashed. There were a ton of fixes here, including some pretty nasty crashes and softlocks. For example, issues with abilities like Reckless Strike stunning the game, crashes involving two-handed shotguns, Cybermastiff pathing bugs, and even specific enemies like Bloodletters being weirdly resistant to fire, they're all fixed. The dev team also cleaned up a lot of ability interactions that used to behave inconsistently. Combat feels smoother, ability animations sync up better, and turns run more predictably. You can tell Owlcat went deep into the game's systems this time, not just patching symptoms, but cleaning up underlying logic. If you've been playing with the Lex Imperialis DLC, you'll notice it got some polish too. They cleaned up the dialogue tone, fixed text inconsistencies, added some extra banter between companions, and smoothed out a few quest lines that had pacing or progression hiccups. It's subtle stuff, but adds up. The DLC already had great writing, and now it just flows more naturally, with fewer awkward breaks or missing voice lines. If you held off on replaying that content because it felt a bit rough at launch, this is the best time to go back. And I've got to say, the update's overall effect on pacing is huge. Even though some builds were nerfed, combat feels fairer, more tactical, and more engaging. There's still room for those satisfying power moments, but now they come from smart planning rather than sheer stat stacking. It's less about abusing mechanics, and more about using your abilities creatively. One thing players are already talking about is how the early to mid-game flow feels less punishing. Before, some players hit a wall around Chapter 2 or 3 if they didn't min-max their squad perfectly. With the new balance pass, that curve feels more natural. It still has that warring difficulty edge, but you're less likely to get completely crushed just because you didn't spec into a top-tier combo from the start. That's a nice shift. It keeps the challenge, but reduces the frustration. Now, if you're wondering whether it's worth reinstalling or jumping back in after taking a break, I'd say absolutely. The 1.5 patch isn't just a tune-up. It's like Owlcat went back and looked at the entire player experience and asked, what can we make feel smoother, smarter, and more balanced without losing that signature grit? They didn't reinvent the game, but they did refine it in all the right ways. For longtime players who love tweaking builds and min-maxing every little advantage, the new talents and item pool are a playground. There are combinations now that simply weren't possible before. And even though some of the more busted stuff got toned down, the new additions open up creative new angles. You can experiment again and actually discover fresh power spikes rather than relying on the same old tricks. And for role players who care more about story immersion and dialogue, the extra polish across Origins and DLC content makes everything flow better. What's also cool is that the game just feels more stable overall. I didn't hit any crashes or slowdowns after the patch, and load times felt a bit quicker. Combat transitions are smoother, and the interface lag that sometimes popped up when switching between inventory or colony screens seems to be reduced. It feels like Owlcat's not just adding content, they're actively tightening the engine. So let's circle back to that question everyone asks after a major update. Should you start a new save? The answer really depends on how you play. If you're midway through a campaign and happy with your build, keep going. The fixes and QOL improvements will make your playthrough smoother, and you'll immediately benefit from all the stability changes. But if you're curious about the reworked Origins, or if you love testing how balance changes shake out across a full run, then yeah, a fresh start is worth it. Especially if you're one of those players who likes to plan colonies efficiently or roleplay specific character arcs. The new economy and colony system make early decisions matter more, so it's actually rewarding to experience that progression again from zero. And while the term balance patch can sound dry, this one doesn't feel that way. It feels like Owlcat's using these updates to keep building momentum toward the long-term life of Rogue Trader. They're not just fixing what's broken, they're nurturing the game, polishing it, expanding it, and keeping it alive.